Greetings and salutations on this bright yet dull and dreary Saturday evening. Yes, I'm back simply because, well, for want of something to do. What better things could I do than have a natter to all the people who frequent my channel? Word up, yo. Anyway, it's all good. So I thought, I'd give some impressions in a little vlog format of some of the Solomon Kane sort of awesomeness we've been getting up to. Follow-up impressions of Solomon Kane. It kicks the camel's arse. Yep, I thoroughly recommend it after actually playing a few sessions. Don't think we're going to be getting bored of that anytime soon. In fact, on the one night I threatened through health reasons to not be attending, my club members in unison. This wasn't pre-planned, they all did this separately, but they all placed threats on my life. Couldn't really let them down, could I, really? Could I? No, couldn't, honest, no, letting down bad. Anyway, so I'm going to get into, this channel was originally set up for novice RPers, so I'm a novice, I still class myself as one, a novice RPer, sort of getting up there, my experiences, giving ideas to other people, what I find easy, what I don't, and that's what this whole channel was originally about. And it never really went that way, did it? But so I'm going to actually sort of go into one of the actual sort of plot point things I actually did. A session we had a couple of weeks back, which they absolutely loved. They thrived over. So it was all very, very good from that respect. And otherwise, before I get into that though, I picked up this very lately. I couldn't resist. Excuse the wibbly blue and red lights that are actually sort of reflecting on the book. I can't do much about that. It's now evening. However, Sundered Skies for Savage Worlds. I couldn't resist. I think it's called Gamer Geeks, the actual video I saw this of. 90 plus videos, that are basically nice, short, professionally done videos. I'm a lot more professional than this stuff I'm doing here. Sort of outlining all the different sort of systems and settings, and it doesn't go into detail, but it certainly gives you a very nice taste. And I'll find the actual proper name, and I'll put the link over there for you. Sort of as soon as I can, as soon as I've actually finished all this. So I'm going to go into this. I must admit, excuse me, I've not actually read through the book completely. However, from what I've read already, and from what I've actually gathered about the setting, basically what I haven't read is the bestiary and the plot points. Most of the other stuff, like the world rules and stuff, I'm delving into, because I only got this a couple of days ago, and I haven't really had a lot of time to read. I'm not, the headaches have still been sort of coming on pretty thick and fast, so I'm not quite sure what's going on now. I just seem to be having a bit of a relapse of my chronic fatigue. However, but anyway, I'm getting through it as I can. And a bit of a page illustration. And yes, do not adjust your sets. These are indeed two ships engaged in naval combat around a floating island in what is apparently mid-air. This is right. This is what this system is all about. This is what I would certainly class as a dark fantasy system. All those catastrophes and all those end-of-the-world sort of rantings and ravings and writings that every culture has. This is the game that takes place after that has actually occurred. So it's actually a really, yes, it's got, as you can see from the front cover, dwarves, dragonkin, humans, elves, glowborn, orcs, I think I'm missing one, wildlings. You get the idea. Anyway, it doesn't have halflings. Then again, probably a good reason for that. You could add them if you wanted to, I guess, but yeah. Anyway, yes, but the fact is, although it's got all the trappings of a fantasy game, it's very, very alternate. I'm going to throw in a game name here of a Japanese JRPG that I actually, console RPG, not a pen and pencil paper, that I played a while back, and unfortunately I lost the discs. And yes, it was overblown. Yeah, you got too many sort of encounters per square inch in it. But Skies of Arcadia, which was all about a young hero on a floating isle that's never really explained. Floating around in this void, and there are airships, and you go on this grand adventure. And essentially, if there was ever a game, a pencil and paper game that was true to that JRPG, and to be honest with you, even if you didn't like the gameplay, the setting was awesome. It was a really very good setting. This would have to be it, but this is definitely a hell of a lot darker. We don't know quite. In fact, well, I do actually know vaguely what the event was that occurred. However, I'm not actually going to go into this because, if you're ever a player of this, that completely spoils it. So from a player's point of view, you don't know really quite what's occurred. Only that at some point in history, the planes themselves were sort of ruptured, destroyed, and what you have now is a collection of islands floating in what's known as the Void. It is a place of perpetual orange light where night never occurs. The higher you go in the Void, the colder it gets, until you reach a sort of a natural ceiling called the Draining Sea. And the reason it's called the Draining Sea is because it's basically a glacial ice flow that is melting above the Void. So you got your tiers of islands down the Void, and above that is a glacial sea. You can go higher, I think. However, if you get too high, then it becomes so cold for your ships that the wood breaks and splinters, and you go plummeting straight back down into whatever you may face first. And the reason it's called the Draining Sea is because the glacier actually melts, and it falls into the Void, and raindrops down onto the islands beneath. That is really nice, and the lower you go, the hotter it gets until you get to the fiery depths. And of course, I think you've got the Dwarven Hold of Deep Helm. I can't remember the name, but it's something along that. But yes, that's the lowest point you can possibly go before you burst into flames. And it's just really, really unique. It's a setting where the people suffer from not much agricultural space. Where basically they've only charted a small amount of the actual landmass itself. Actually here, I don't know if you can see, but we actually have a small chart of all the islands and little things like that. The Draining Sea up top, and you've got the flaming skies beneath. Now, basically, so far this has sounded pretty generic. It just sounds like fantasy in a slightly different format, which might be cool in itself. However, there are several different things, just sort of details. For instance, elves in this are actually inherently, they're basically part of nature. So much a part of nature that when you actually create an elven character, you have to choose one of 8 different floral abilities they might have, i.e. thorns are growing out of them that give them a better grapple thing. They're actually encased in vines that allow them to basically give them wall walk, like Spider-Man sort of thing, but the vines sort of crush into the wall. Even things like they excrete an aphrodisiac perfume that makes them exceedingly acceptable in other rings of society. Just little details like this that make it different, right? Is that elves have actually got what is known as the rights of fleshcraft, which means, well, they grow their own ships for a start, which is quite cool, because they're all in with nature, they hate technology. However, they're actually probably the most morally deficient race in the game, which is a big sort of woo thing as far as elves are going. Because in actual fact, they, in this place called the Flesh Forge, create their own slaves that they treat abysmally, called the Wildlings, and they create these squirrels, rats, tortoises, magpie, you name it, it's there. And they create these wildlings that they use as their slaves. And, they've even got, and they've got very short, harsh lives, poor little critters. And you can play those in the game, which is great, and there are rules in here, and there's a bit of a background and whatnot. But biggest of all is the fact that the orange glow, there's no night, as I mentioned before, in the Void. And basically, it slowly the more people are exposed to it, the more insane they become. And so this is actually written into here, huge mechanics, that basically, being a crew of a ship is actually quite a hazardous thing, because you're actually constantly being exposed to this orange light, this sort of maddening existence. But you have to, because it's your way of life, and it kind of gives you a nice twist. And like I said, I have visions of like ship-to-ship aerial combat and sailors falling into the void only to be set. And it's a really sort of also quite weird and warped setting. Like you can have like behemoth-like blue whales just happily swimming through mid-air, sort of birds flying along next to them, tubers and whatnot. So in other words, to sustain themselves, a lot of islands, they just get their airships, rig up a net between them, and they quite literally trawl and harvest for their foodstuffs, which is awesome. It's a really, really well thought out setting. And the other really nice detail I liked, and I can't remember what the name of this, but the navigational device is an arrowhead of, I think it may be iron or something, propped in water, in a spherical globe of water. And the thing is, you actually, to get where you want to go, you have to attune the thing, and to do this, you need a pinch of the dirt of the island you're actually heading to. I mean, that is, really nice ideas. Before I overrun completely into the 11-minute mark, which is bad for YouTube, as you can see, the book isn't too thick. However, it does have a lot of plot points. It gives you a very good, I think, description on the world, how things work, amazingly. Because remember that the rules aren't actually in here for this one. This is just the settings. This is just basically an over settings book for Savage Worlds. So, but you could definitely get in here everything you need. So I would, I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment when I make the other video. But give this a look anyway. I'll be right back. Won't be a mo.